Hi everybody, welcome back to the Secret Men's Business Podcast. This is Joey Buzzatall. On today's show, we're going to go all the way to the Sunshine Coast up in Queensland. We're going to talk to someone that's an expert in helping to heal. I mean, healing is a really big thing that we sometimes think we know about, but in reality, there's so much more to learn. On today's show, we're going to be speaking to Adam Stanecki. Yep, Adam Stanecki from the Sunshine Coast. He's a coach and he does lots of work with men, helping them to heal and to find a place where they can really enjoy the life that they're meant to live. So let's welcome to the show, Adam. How are you, Adam?
I'm wonderful, thanks, Joey. The sun's shining.
So I know. Look at that bamboo there. It's beautiful. What's the temperature there today?
Well, that's a really good question. We'd be mid 20s, but it's lovely and moist from the recent rain, and the sun's out. It would be silly to be here and complaining.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I'm going to retire.
Do it
up in that. Like that was my dream because I do like it up there, and I lived there for a little while when it was nothing, and now I believe it's everything.
Everyone's here at the moment. There's been a massive influx over the last 18 months.
Yeah, like I think you're going to get more now, like a lot more.
I think we will. It is very different. So we moved from Melbourne. I grew up in the western suburbs of Melbourne. We moved up 6 years ago after holidaying here for 10 to 15 years and wondering why we kept going home. Why isn't this home?
Yeah. So before we start, can you just tell us, before we get into the topic of how we heal our hearts and how we enter that space, do you want to just talk a little bit about you, to explain to our audience something about your background with what you do?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm on the Sunshine Coast. So specifically, I'm in Sunshine Beach, which is right near Noosa. But thankfully out of the main tourist trap areas. So it's kind of a sleepy town most of the year, except for Easter and Christmas. Wife and 2 kids, very happy with all of that. Got all of the lovely craziness that comes with a wife and 2 children moving into their teen years. So it's just this wonderful chaos in my house. And I've been on a journey since probably my teen years of investigating philosophy and psychology and consciousness, I would call it now. I didn't understand what it was back then. Started as a student of martial arts and then found out by accident that I was coaching people. It was a martial arts coach, then a PT, then I owned a gym, and then the people that were at the gym were asking me for career advice, and then I became a business coach by accident.
Yeah.
And then I worked out that business coaching isn't about business coaching, it's about people coaching.
Yeah. I mean, can I just say, I've heard that story, like I myself resonate with you because I went through the same thing, but that seems to be the story for a lot of men and how they step into the light because they've been doing it for a while.
Most of this stuff is scratching one's own itch in my experience.
Well, I was going to say, do you have a personal experience for yourself? Like I had a breakdown because of a relationship breaking down, and I ended up losing myself, which then led me to find this doorway to this world. Did you have a situation, or was yours more just like I'm hearing you saying that it's been part of you since you were a teenager? So is yours just organic, you think?
No, well, I think that intellectually I was investigating all of this stuff on that higher but not deeper level.
Right.
So I was reading the books. I was, watching the movies and, Bruce Lee talked about this and, there's some interesting philosophy there. Let's have a look at Taoism and read Lao Tzu. But I wasn't embodying any of it. So that's sort of my teenage 20s. And I had a few relationships that I thought were going to be the one and they all went horribly wrong. And then it took a while to work out that I'm the common denominator here.
Yeah.
It's not outside that the work needs to be done, it's inside.
But that's still quite mature for, when you were saying you're reading those books, I'm thinking, wow, that's, you're very humbled. Like that's still an advanced way of seeing things. Did you have any, did you share that with your male friends, or was it more a private thing when you're first exploring that? Because it is, I do think it was quite advanced for you to do it when you were a teenager. Back then there would have been probably, it would have been more, not as big as it is now. So I'm just curious to know if you spoke about it or it was more just something that you did.
No, I would suggest that most of my interactions, especially with men at that point, would have been very surface level.
Right.
And I had a recent experience. I went on a 3-day men's retreat. There were 40 men there, and it was a deep dive. It was beautiful work. I love that stuff. but one of the things that we had profound connections with other men. And I said to the facilitator, thank you, because I find that it takes me 10 years to get through all of the bull to really connect with another man because of all of these fears around what men are supposed to be and vulnerability is not good. And I can't say, Joe, I love you.
Yes, you can. You can to me.
I'll say it to you. I have no problem. I'm talking about the modelling that we all learn.
Sure. Do you feel, is it more about you saying it, or do you feel like you block it because of the fact that you don't know what they're going to respond with?
No, I'm good with it. But what I was trying to get at with is not knowing how it was going to be received for a long time. So in this container of this retreat, we broke through all that stuff in 72 hours.
That's great.
So it's beautiful. But going back to your question about, did I talk about this stuff with my male friends when I was a teenager and in my early 20s? No, because I perceived it to be too confrontational for them.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just a weird kind of dynamic when you're like, I want to dig deep. I don't want to talk about the weather.
Yeah. But I love the fact that, you know, again, I'm relating to you is that we both realized, I think, that we had this uncertainty about how we could be ourselves. But then when we did I can't talk for you, but when I did the work on myself, I did let go of all that. And I made it a conscious decision to let them deal with that themselves. So if I was to say, I love you, if I was to say to them, hey, tell me what's going on and be very sensitive, they had to sort of, if they were uncomfortable, that's not my problem. My problem is to step into my truth. And, you know, that I think is something that's happening more and more with men in general. Because I think we have to encounter that, don't we? We can't just wait. I think the waiting thing is over. We have to now start to, you know, show and be and step up. And then people will actually go, oh, thank you. I wanted to do that too. And so they start stepping up.
Yes. And see, that was part of me moving from the western suburbs of Melbourne to here, was a geographical change as much as it was a philosophical change to connect with people who were more heart than head.
Yes.
Yeah, because western suburbs of Melbourne, very macho, very closed off, very cold.
That's where I live now.
Yeah, but it's true, like, except for yourself.
Yeah, no, you're right.
The last time I came to Melbourne, I remember walking down the street with a smile on my face because I was remembering Smith Street in Collingwood. And I was doing all of that fun stuff in my old little, the grounds that I used to work and live in. But no one else was smiling back at me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm disconnected here. Whereas if I walk down the street here anywhere on the sunny coast and I smile at someone, the chances are they're going to go, hey, brother, how you doing?
Yes. So while you brought that up, even though it's not on the list, like what do you think are the factors that causes those guys? Like I grew up in the western suburbs. I moved away. Then I got a disability and moved back, and I've ended up staying because of, you know, situations. But I can feel how different I am. But, you know, when I notice other people, I don't necessarily see some of the deeper issues that they may have, because I guess I don't really interact with a lot of people in this area. So, like, what do you think when you were living here, what were some of the things that would block, say, other fathers or men that felt that they they had to perform because their own fathers wanted them to be a particular way, if they were ethnic, all those things? What was going on in their head that stopped them to change?
All of that, right? So, my background's Polish. I had friends who were Macedonian, Greek, Croatian, Serbian. So you can imagine the tension in the area.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, totally.
And Lebanese friends, all of these wonderful ethnicities, all in the melting pot. And we're like one generation removed from most of those people having fathers or grandfathers who were in war.
Yeah.
So it's very confrontational. Now, if you learn that.
So what was the emotion that they're learning?
I think what happened is they had an inability to trust by default.
Right.
So there's
this wall that, like, be careful of that person or that group.
I can remember being a young man walking around in Melbourne and the western suburbs, sizing up whether I was going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
In terms of physical violence or altercations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that meant I had to not be trusting to a certain degree. Like, there had to be that number of steps before you could connect.
But you also had to be heightened all the time.
Yes, and like then you feel. Like
It's funny that you say that. Like, I was quite naive and innocent, and then one day I remember, like, what it's interesting you say what you just said, because I didn't know any of that stuff because I was from a Catholic family and we got a big Maltese family, so I was protected, I felt. But then one day I went roller skating and out of nowhere, this Australian guy just roller skated up to me and punched me in the face. And I went home and I remember that everything that you said then started happening from that moment.
Mm.
I always had this thing in the back of my head where I can't trust if someone's going to pop out and actually do that again. So that trust is one. Do you think anger is another one? Are they angry? And that's how they sort of, is that how they project from looking at themselves? They blame other people and they get sort of.
Well, I think we model it as well. Because you think of this is not just a man thing. This is a male and female thing, and any of the gender identities, right? It doesn't matter where you come from.
Mm.
You model what you see. You might not be explicitly be taught other men are dangerous. You need to watch out, but you see it, and you might have an experience like you had. I had that experience in the playground. I got attacked with weapons.
Wow.
So
what suburb were you living in?
I was living in St Albans.
St Albans, okay, yeah.
So that was pretty rough. I mean,
yeah, like my auntie lives there, so I think it sort of got rougher as time went on, didn't it?
It did, well, because and it's just it's a social thing. They poured people in from different populations, and there was this idea that those people coming in had to assimilate.
Yeah,
there were no processes or support for that to happen. So when I was young, we had people coming in from Southeast Asia.
Mm.
But the culture is so completely different that, of course, they're going to belt up against each other.
But, like, that's the thing I wanted to, I guess, explore. Like, why? Like, why do you think they're, I don't want to assume that it's just ethnic men because it's all. But why is there this desire to deal with things in a territorial aggression way rather than just, I'm hoping that they're changing now, but even now it seems to be still got that aggressive nature. Is it just inbuilt? When you do the work with the men, do you feel that there is a trauma there, or do you feel like it's just what you were saying, they've learnt that?
Some men have a trauma, but I think honestly, I think most of all, this is not nature. It's how we're nurtured. It's how we're taught. It's what we learn. We learn it on the television. We learn it on the radio. We learn it from, God forbid, mainstream media.
Yeah.
We see it when we're down the street. It's like I've talked to so many men, for example, I've talked to so many men who are like, I'm so sick of the vacuous conversations that are had at the pub over beer.
Yeah. But I feel that is where we've got to take responsibility. And like, that's why you left, right? You decided that, I mean, I'm the same, like I feel, and it is I think we need to talk about the fact that there is a transition and it's lonely. So I don't know, did you go through a bit of loneliness, how you had to like reinvent and create new friends and step away? And I want to quickly share something. Like, I was the firstborn, right? And so I was really quite lucky. My mum and dad worked and my auntie looked after me. And in that time, those 2 years that my auntie looked after me, every day, I'm not lying, every day she took me out to experience culture. Wow. And when my sister and my brother were born, by that point, my grandmother looked after them. And for some reason, I don't know if that experience made me vulnerable and sensitive. So I ended up being totally different to my brother, who was like that, one of those boys that you're talking about. He was quite aggressive, where I felt a lot of stuff because of that experience, right? Like, she just took me to galleries and I was only 2 years old, right? And so
that makes sense to me, Joe. That makes a whole lot of sense because you're looking at art.
Yeah.
And art doesn't exist from an intellectual place. That's intuitive. It's creative.
But isn't it amazing how one little thing can change your whole life?
Of course.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. I think a lot of this is environment and teaching. Now, we can get really kind of esoteric and talk about sort of ancestral wounds and all of that kind of stuff. And I think there's something to that. I don't profess to understand it. Like, I can't answer your questions about community because I don't understand sociology. I can only speak from interactions with individual men and groups of men who are on the journey doing the work. Yeah.
But, I feel what goes with that, and I want to keep it simple and not go into the groups that you mentioned. I think that everyone has to have a desire to change. And so there is, we could talk about that for ages itself. There's peer pressure, there's, wanting to be liked, there's the whole alpha and the tribe part of it, there's that whole passiveness, there's so much stuff. But when you decide that you want something to change, that's where it's hard, because you've got to break ties and you've got to do things that other people may not like. And we all know that a lot of people will do anything in their power to keep you at their level. Right? So how do you get those guys that come to see you to do the wholehearted, the ceremonies that you do or the groups that you offer? Like, what is some of the things that you notice that they have to break away from to start doing the work?
Well, once they've made the decision, you're 90% the way there.
Okay. So they're ready, and they're ready to be vulnerable.
I think they're ready to be vulnerable, and then you have to show them either someone else being vulnerable or how simple it is to be vulnerable. And
I didn't realize it was that easy. So
it can be. It doesn't mean that it is.
I know. I just think that you're describing a really beautiful environment, and that's why I think men have fear, and then once they step over and they've got that commitment, then it's easy, isn't it? It's not. I'm not saying it's easy to do it. I'm just saying men just have to trust that they can step over, and then you facilitate a space where it becomes comfortable.
And let me explain an experience that I've had lately. I've got a very close brother here who decided to open up the backyard of his property where he has a fire, and he's built a circle of benches around the fire, and every 2 weeks he opens that space to 10 to 15 men to come in, and we sit around the fire, and there's ceremony, there's process, there's a very particular way that we do it, and men from different points on the journey come and sit in that circle. And sometimes some of the men will come in and they will never have shared any of their stuff ever before. But what happens immediately is they get to see other men sharing and being vulnerable.
Right.
And then they get to they've already made the decision to come. So there's something that they want to shift. But then they get to make the decision about how deep they want to go and how vulnerable they want to be there. And there's never any judgment placed upon them. Right. So that's a beautiful first experience.
And we've talked about trauma before, and we talked about ancestral stuff. But when we talk about them coming, because I'm guessing that it's the first time for some of them, what are the main things? Why are they coming? Are they coming because they know that they're broken, or are they coming because they're relationship? What are the main things that cause them to go, hey, I need to start doing this work?
Well, so there's something that's in the way. There's some stuckness.
Right.
And I can't speak to individual men because that would be sharing outside of the sanctity of any of these circles, but you'll have things like you talked about anger before. So there'll be anger issues that'll be manifesting in certain ways. There'll be relationship issues with partners, and they're not sure how to resolve that. So maybe coming to this space, and this is only one of the spaces, because they could come and see someone like you to talk about it.
Yeah. But it's just about them doing it and going, and that's the thing, which I find. I don't know if you know this stat, but did you realize that only 27 or 28% of men seek therapy or seek?
I wouldn't have even thought it would have been that high.
I know. Well, maybe that number is for everyone, but like I was a little bit shocked because I thought it'd be more. I was going to ask you later, but I'm going to ask you now: is how do you, because you're such an expert and hands-on with doing this work, how do you feel about the fake guru that's been created, where these men who have got no experience and they want to, I mean, I don't want to say this out loud, but I'm going to. It's really about money, and so then it's the responsibility of helping these men heal when they've got no experience, like. I don't know if you've encountered any, but like I'm just curious on your opinion. I'm not getting you to be specific.
I struggle.
Do you notice it? You notice it then?
I notice it a lot. And what's been really interesting in a society that's based on algorithms and that kind of thing at the moment, I've only recently jumped back on social media to connect with more people and see what's happening. So I don't get this false idea of my beautiful little community and not understand what's happening outside it.
Yes.
But as soon as I put the word coach in, all of a sudden the algorithm is putting in front of me coaches of coaches.
Right.
People I've never heard of before claiming outrageous things.
I'm the coaches of coaches, so they want to train you.
Yes, of course they do. But have you ever coached anyone who's not a coach? Because that's, to be quite honest, that's an easy sell. You want to be a coach, you don't know how to sell coaching. I can teach you how to sell coaching. Look at me, I just sold you coaching. I must be good at what I do. It's a cyclical kind of thinking, but it works.
I hate it though.
It drives me mad.
Well, I sort of don't see this work. I can feel that you're the same, right? Heart-centered. I don't see this work being about, selling. You know, like the whole selling thing. I know we're going to run a business, right? But you can still do it. Like, I feel like I've never actually focused on that as a main point. But the energy and the surrender and trust just brings the clients in. But I'm focusing from intention. And I think that, you know, look, some people are young and they really they've amazed me. I've interviewed them. But then there are other people that are very driven towards money. Do you think that the punters or that's not a good word, but you know, do you think that the men that you see, are they wise? Do they understand that sell thing that we were talking about? Or can some get sucked in it?
The men that come to me, yes, because I sort of sit in this space where I'm talking to people who've already stepped over the threshold, they're doing the work.
Yeah.
And then they're hitting up against something.
Mm.
That's where I start with men.
Yes.
Now, some men who are not yet stepping over the threshold might see my content, might reach out, and they might be attracted to the flashing lights of one of the bigger personalities and go that way.
And you know what I call that? The flashing lights is easy, quick fix.
Of course it is.
You know, and what you're offering is rawness, and you probably have experienced people that have quit because they're not ready, right? And so what do you think causes that? Why do you think that they offer or they show a commitment, and then you start to dig a little bit and then they freak out?
Well, it's a fear response, pure and simple.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot with my clients that have got addictions.
Oh, well, addiction's a beautiful one, right? Because it's never the thing. And what we get to do with addiction is we get to say, I'm addicted. So we get to put a label on it.
Yes, and then they just can't go deeper.
Well, I can remember when I was doing clinical hypnosis, and of course you would understand this. People want to come to you for smoking because that's the big thing out there. And I was quite okay working with people who wanted to get past smoking because I knew that wasn't the thing. It was covering up something else. But many people would come in and say, I'm addicted and I'm going to have withdrawals. And I would sit them down and talk for 10 minutes. I never had a single person that had anything that was clinically an addiction, nor did they have any withdrawal symptoms.
Yes.
And so addiction's this interesting thing, and I'm not belittling anyone who does work in addiction. It's multifaceted. Yeah,
that's the thing. It's deep and it's very complex. And so, you know, it's a very rare thing that you will find someone that is just got an issue with and they've got a good life and they don't smoke. But I really believe that if you loved yourself, you wouldn't smoke.
Well, there you go.
You know what I mean? Why would you put that in your body?
Or you would make a mindful decision about when you smoked.
Yes.
And it might be in a certain context, or you might even do it ceremonially. You might go and get some kind of like organic tobacco, and it might be like a shamanistic ritual.
Yeah.
Or you might smoke a cigar in celebration of something. But you're not doing it.
Like, you're not doing 30 a day.
You're not doing it as some kind of unconscious pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
That's when it's a problem. And that's true of anything. It doesn't have to be smoking or drug use or alcohol or anything like that. Like people, it
could be porn addiction. It could be. It could be just being on the social media, like you were saying before about. It could be anything.
And they're just covering up stuff. So that's why I find addiction really interesting. And I mean, I had someone come and visit me recently again for smoking, and I said to her, "Look, we can do smoking, or we can do some work." And in about 5 minutes, she was in tears.
Yeah.
And I said, it's your choice now. We can sit in that space and we can do that work, because to me, that's what I'm feeling is important for you.
Yeah.
If that's too heavy, I'll just click my fingers and you can stop smoking.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you find most people are open to that?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes, you know, there's reasons, isn't there? Some people say, some people have no issue with the money, and then other people, they want the quick thing. You know, they don't want to do the work. But I think that's just all. I mean, I remember the day I remember going to the market in Alinda, and I bought a book, right, but by Louise Hay, right? Mm-hmm. That was before. It was back in the early, like mid 80s, and I remember putting that book on my bookshelf and not reading it for 8 years. Like, that's how much I wasn't ready. So, you know, everyone has their own turnaround. You know, COVID and all these things that we're going through now, what do you feel is the energy of the world now as we come to the end of 2021?
How long have we got, Joey? How long?
I know. It's a big, it's
heavy.
It's heavy, you think? And it's do you have hope?
Yes, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope. Now, I actually was at a meeting at my school community last night, and there were massive discussions in and around this. And what I find is really interesting is the deeper discussions are not in and around medication and decisions around that. They're around choice and personal sovereignty.
Choice to do what?
Choice to live your life the way you want to live.
Right.
Whether you want, for example, whether you want to be vaccinated or not be vaccinated.
Right, okay,
Whether you want to travel or not travel.
Yes.
And I think that the schism at the moment is mainly due to the messaging that's out there, creating an us versus them mentality.
Yeah. I was just saying that this morning. I was saying, why can't we just solve the problems as people?
Yes. Well,
does it have to be a fight, or is that just how we built?
No, well, again, we keep coming back to this same thing, Joe, and I think it's what we're taught. And another layer of that is, if what we've been consuming for the last 20, 30 plus years is fear, and we're scared of losing our jobs, losing our livelihoods, not being able to pay the mortgage, getting sick, all of these things, then perhaps in some cases the decisions are based on that rather than something a little bit more conscious. And again, I'm not judging.
Yeah. No. I mean, like, you're sort of outlining that everyone's on their own. Everyone really has to do what you just said about the meeting last night. That is, everyone has to realize that, let's not complicate it. It is just about choice, right? It doesn't have to be complicated, but I think that we like to look for complications. My belief on that is that we do that only because we don't want to work on ourselves.
We get to push everything outside us, and then we say we've got no control. You gave your control away.
Yeah.
You gave your so here in Queensland, just logistically at the moment, there are a whole bunch of mandates coming in 2 weeks from today, with restrictions on where people who have decided not to get vaccinated can go.
Right.
So that's a choice, and that's okay. That's a choice.
Yeah.
So you can choose not to go to those venues.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
I still don't like. I think that there needs to be a flip. I think that what needs to happen is the venue
mandate, Joey. Like, you can't even. If you get me started, we'll be here for a while.
No. But what I'm saying is that I think that the venue should decide if they're going to be a venue. So then it just becomes a little bit less, and it becomes more humane rather than becoming absolute. Anyway, we can talk about that at another podcast.
They're talking about the energy.
Yeah.
There's a divide and a schism, because whatever it is out there is creating us versus them.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question just about me then? Because I feel like when COVID started, I think because of my experience, my past 6 years, because I had a disability I had to go through, I sort of like learned to adapt, and I don't notice that energy. Is that am I bad for not noticing it?
No.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't really get affected by the protesters. I don't get angry. I just sort of like think, okay, they're doing their thing. I'm doing my thing. I'm going to keep going with my thing.
Sure.
And just adapt. So I feel like people want you to be dragged into it, though.
Well, you can recognise it. You don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah, I recognise it, but I don't really I'm not really interested in getting caught up in and they do that, they do that. Yeah. But I think people want me, I do feel a pressure to decide.
To decide what?
Just to be on what other people believe. But I address it, but I can feel it. Like, people want me to sort of say, agree with them. I don't really want to agree with anyone. I just want to do what I want to do.
No, see, I come from the point that everyone is doing the best they can with what they've got right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether that's information, belief structures, habits, some kind of situation that requires a particular type of behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I to judge? I don't want to be judged by them, so who am I to judge?
Yes.
Now, that's where I sit, and I'm not saying everyone else should sit there.
No, but I think that the thing that is fascinating for me, listening to you, is that we're almost coming up to 2 years, and I would have thought by now the world people would have understood. But, I've got some friends, and I'm not judging them, but I do have some friends that have decided to sit on the couch for that time. And so nothing changes, right? Mm-hmm. And then they sort of have this pity party story, but... I was probably a little bit naive. I did hope that people would want to learn. And obviously I've realized something bigger has to happen for them to do that. That's okay. But, I think that you really hit the nail on the head. Everything's about a choice. So what that really means is that you can't blame anyone.
No.
For anything.
How does it help?
Well, it makes it easier for them not to do the work. That's all.
Well, that's exactly right. So if you blame, you put it out there, and then it's not my fault anymore.
Yeah.
Nothing more I can do about it.
Yeah. Can I ask you about what your thoughts are about masculinity and femininity for men? Like, how do you feel about the men being both? Because we have to be both, right?
Mhm.
So vulnerability is a feminine energy, but so so how do you feel men are taking to that, and how do you feel about it?
Well, I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
The ideas of maybe the last generation is it was skewed towards masculinity, and then all of a sudden we're hearing about toxic masculinity. I hate that term, by the way.
Mm.
I don't think it defines it. Maybe unhelpful masculinity would be a better term.
Or lost masculinity,
And because the same is true on the feminine side. You can have a little bit too much, and then you're out of balance.
Yes.
I mean, everyone knows the yin yang, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. See, what you just said, that everybody knows, and I feel like that they're not listening.
or they're just not yet there to step into that.
Yes, okay.
And so there is a difficulty. And
that's true. That's true.
I think masculinity is beautiful, but when we start to move into macho, it's too much. We're out of balance now. And
well, so, is that masculinity, or do you think it's also a bit of an entitlement?
Oh,
you know how
there might be a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But I think people get comfortable in what works for them for a little while until it's not working anymore.
Okay.
And then they've got to reassess.
Yes. Okay.
Then they've got to reassess. And some of them, I mean, and we are in this beautiful space where we see men moving into these feminine qualities.
Yeah.
Now, I put my hand up, and I would suggest intellect versus intuition. Intellect is a more masculine quality, and intuition is more a feminine quality.
Okay.
So because of where I came from, my background and my upbringing and all the stuff I learned, I stayed in my head forever.
Yeah.
We're talking in metaphor, right?
No, I may think as well, so I totally get you.
Yeah, but for me, it took a long time to let myself feel and trust my gut.
Yeah.
Like that intuitive thinking. Now, we could go down the rabbit hole and how there is actually an intuitive mind, and there's a heart mind, and there's even a stomach mind, and it's all connected, and even physiologically and anatomically.
You got daughters, haven't you? You said.
I've got one daughter. I've got one of each.
Okay, so can I talk about your son? How hard is it for a young boy today, or is it? Do you think it's easier?
No, I think the difficulty is there is so much more information that a younger man and a younger woman have to sift through.
Yeah.
Almost to the point of being overloaded. My son's brilliant. Like he's one of my great teachers. His brain's wired completely differently to mine. He's much more empathic, much more intuitive.
How did he learn that, from you?
No, he came out that way.
Wow.
He landed with that.
That's beautiful.
He just landed with it. And so navigating him growing up, he's 13, moving into 14 next year. So he's about 13. He's halfway through his 13. First year as a teen. So stuff's starting to happen. He's starting to ask questions. He's starting to investigate different things.
Wow.
But he has kind of, in and of his own way, he doesn't really feel the need to investigate stuff that's not right in front of him right now.
Yeah, okay.
And so he's very intuitive. So I feel blessed in that way that I don't have.
So you don't feel like he's going to change dramatically?
Oh, at some point he will. Like he's got to, you get to the point where you're like, I've got to kill the father figure. And
yeah. And what about his friends? Are they the same?
They're all over the place.
They're all over the place. They're not grounded.
Different. No. Oh. Different personalities.
Right. Okay.
Different personalities.
So that's sort of different to what you were saying, isn't it? It's like they got permission to be themselves with their friends, which I love.
I mean, my kids are in an independent school. They go to a Steiner school, so it's a slightly different way of bringing children up in an educational environment. And one of their highest values is allowing the kids to be individuals.
Yes.
And not putting them in, like you might be a round peg, but we're going to shove you into a square hole.
Yeah.
So I
know your son's only 13, but do you feel, I've noticed, right, since COVID that clientele, 13 to 24, that's like multiplied with anxiety, right? So I've seen a lot of those people. But it sounds like your son is, he's explorative and he's adapting and all that. So I'm guessing that he talks to you in a more confident, more empowered way thinking about the future.
When he talks.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I'm talking about with climate change and all those pressures that are being thrown down our throats. So how does he respond to that?
Well, I think he feels it rather than thinks it.
Okay.
And so that's interesting because I have to translate that, right? Because that's not my default way of going about the world.
Yeah. So he's more kinesthetic then, isn't he?
Yeah, he feels into it first. So
Right.
then he will get emotional about stuff that he might have a judgment in right or wrong. So then, my job becomes just allowing that to be as it is, and helping him navigate that if he needs that help.
Yeah, but that's such a beautiful step, isn't it? But I think it's so lovely. That's and a healthy way to be, rather than to be, peer pressured or to because most kids are learning everything at school.
Oh yeah.
From the other people, and that's when we're talking about addictions and we talk about porn, like again, that's a really big thing. Like that's a big thing that I see clients with because they start at your son's age, and then by the time they get to adults to be to have a relationship, they've got a total disconnection. And so, your son looks like he's exploring things that are nurturing and that are natural and that are intuitive rather than things that are distracting and destructive and also masculine, that whole, I know at the moment, but he's got the foundation. That's the beautiful thing. And I
hope that continues for him. It's interesting that you bring up like pornography addiction. And I wonder how much that's got to do with the ease of accessibility. Because I remember when I was, 13, 14, me and all the boys were interested.
We had magazines.
But how do you get a magazine? You can't.
One boy would get it and everyone would have to. I know. I think you're right. I think that is actually applicable to everything, not just porn.
Of course.
I think for those kids, like you were saying before, if they want to know something,
it's there.
It's there, right? And so that's intense. That must be so exhausting in the brain. And also it must mean that they get bored quicker because there's always stimulation.
I don't know that they get bored more quickly, but there is this need for instant gratification and the next thing.
Yeah. And you did say something interesting because I was just thinking about my own nephew. So you said if he talks, right? So my nephew and niece will come over to visit and they will talk to me in the room via text. So they're in the same room and they're texting me but without talking, and I'm thinking this is bizarre. But I play along because I just accept that's the way that they do it, right? Uh-huh. And so it's been interesting, like because I work for an agency a few days a week, and it's interesting. Some of the clients want to do therapy on text. They don't want to talk.
I couldn't do that.
I know, but that's just what's available now to that group, right?
Wow.
So it's interesting how there's all these things that are sort of evolving, and how I've had to adapt, to how people want to heal. So before we finish, just give us a bit of a general view of what you do in the men's group. So I'm going to put all your details in the bio, but what could a person expect if they were to come to a men's group?
So the local men's groups, it's just immersion of experience with other men, really.
Right.
And different processes that are designed primarily to do what I always talk about, getting out of your head and into your heart, which again, metaphor. So start feeling stuff again. And the way we start feeling stuff is we start feeling sensation in the body, and then we can start feeling emotions, and it's a gentle way in. I'm giving the game away, right? Because rather than me saying what you need to do is be able to feel your emotions and get in tune with your feminine side and feel love rather than...
You can't say that the first day, can you?
No, it all comes through experientially.
Yeah. Are you getting a variety of people?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're getting married, single, older, younger?
Yeah.
Are you getting a lot of younger?
The recent retreat I did, which I wasn't running, we had 13 and 14-year-old boys who came along.
I think that's what we need to do more of. We need to have that in school.
Well, one of the things I want to do this coming year is sort of a coming-of-age rites of passage for fathers and sons. And it doesn't have to be fathers and sons. It could be uncle and nephew. It could be granddad and grandson. Whatever, like father figure, let's say.
Well, I've read somewhere that that's one thing that's lacking. It's that whole traditional handover of elders. And that's why a lot of young guys these days are lost, because they've lost that edge of like, you know how, for example, we would get up for an old person on a tram or train. And I think the young people now don't see anything beyond that because of that feeling of being about themselves. And, that's just something that I guess has sort of lost its way a little bit. I mean, I know I didn't learn that from my father. Did you?
But I mean, moving past just basic manners.
Yeah.
And how to interact with people, which is maybe a more modern problem than you and I. Our generation didn't have that as much.
Mm.
The thing that I see is there is no ceremony and definitive point where a boy is told, now you are a man.
Yeah. And
in tribal cultures all over the world, back to the dawn of humanity, there has been some kind of a process. And
yes.
there are women's processes as well.
Yes. How did we do it? How did we know? Do you think? I sort of felt that I was a man when I left home.
I guess you have to make it up for yourself.
Yeah, and I guess more people that age now are staying at home more because of certain circumstances.
Yes, and I think that without that definitive ceremony and process, we run the risk of men moving through their adult life as boys.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
At some level.
Yeah.
And the most obvious level is how a man might relate to his father, always as the boy in the relationship.
Yeah, totally. I can say that right now. That's how I work with my dad. Yeah, well, my dad just triggers me. He just triggers me, and it is interesting how your brain just goes back to being 12.
Oh yeah, because there's a point. There's always a point where you're like that kid again.
Yeah.
I worked at it maybe 5 or so years ago, and I actually got up in front of my men's group and I said, I've just had a revelation that I have always been interacting with my father as a boy.
Yeah.
I was 40.
Wow.
And I said, I'm not doing that anymore.
And did your dad respond to that?
Well, it kind of happened organically with my dad. I stepped into more of a, we are, like, you are my elder, you are my father, I honor you in that regard, and yet let's interact as men, not man and boy.
Okay.
And so I didn't explicitly say to him.
No, but did he push back or did he just step into that role naturally?
No, we're great friends, mates now, as well as father and son.
Yeah. Oh my God, I think you need to do that course. Because I think it's really required. There needs to be that sort of, that old, I don't want to say the word old school, but it needs to be that traditional element to come back. So it's all really linked all to values, isn't it? And when you don't have values, you don't really have a very good intuition system.
And in a lot of these ancient rites, there was the overcoming of fear and the learning that you can believe in yourself and get over some kind of hardship or difficulty. So it might be that you're fasting for 3 days and you've got to go and build your camp, and it's a long walk, and you've got to go over there to get water, and no one's coming to help you.
Yeah. And then Adam, I could talk to you for hours. We've gone over, but that's fine. I think I really, if you'd like, I'd love to have you back on, because these conversations are the sort of things that I now am harnessing from particular people, because if we don't talk about it, then we don't talk about it. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the things that I get frustrated with is that people would rather go on TikTok and spend 4 hours, but rather than having a conversation. And as we become more and more, I guess, influential through our own way of living, I think people get drawn to that. Like you were saying, they need to be ready, but they're drawn to what they see, right? There is a bit of confusion at the moment. A lot of young guys think that they can make money, right, by going on social media. But I think that may be something we could talk about another time. Sure. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
This is great. The only thing that we missed was a cup of tea or a cup of coffee while we were having a chat.
That's all right. It's like, it's summer. Do you drink tea? It's unusual that you said the word tea instead of coffee.
I think I said cuppa earlier, but I'm a coffee.
Oh, cuppa. I heard tea in my head.
Ah, there you go. See, word association.
See, I don't drink any caffeine, so I will have to have my version of that.
Okay, good. Yeah. I'm full on caffeine at the moment. I have to ease off for the rest of the afternoon.
Well, have a great day in that beautiful sunny weather, and think about us in Melbourne, where we've got 3-4 things happening at once, like hot, cold. Did you see the storms yesterday?
No, but we've had storms all week, so it's why it's just I'm very thankful for the sun.
So namaste. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you soon. Okay. So you've been listening to the Secret Men's Business podcast. Now, Adam's podcast will be out on Monday, and make sure that you hit subscribe and like. Season 2 of the Secret Men's Business podcast is almost over, and we're going to start season 3 in early 2022. Can you believe we've almost made 200 episodes? Oh my God. I remember the first one. It was so bad. And now almost 200. So make sure you do hit like and subscribe. Also, I'll have all of Adam's information down below in his bio. So make sure you click and hit him up. He's a very easy guy to talk to. See you next time, guys. Bye.